Hi, this is Chris with Sanderson Test Prep, and here we're taking a look at questions 15 through 17 in Section 4 of SAT Practice Test 1. So for questions 15 and 16, they refer to the following information, and here we see a graph where it shows the relationship of the total cost of renting a boat by the hour to the time in hours. So here we have total cost and time as our axes, and let's take a look and see what question 15 asks. It says, what does the c-intercept represent in the graph? Okay, well, first of all, let's think of what we know about that term intercept. So if we're talking cost, and they tell us here that total cost is represented by c, so when they say c-intercept, it means the total cost intercept, and total cost is on our y-axis. So basically, they're asking us for the meaning of this y-intercept. And one thing that you should associate whenever you see y-intercept, some of the language that you should be looking for is beginning or initial or starting value. So when you're talking about the y-intercept, remember the y-intercept occurs when x equals 0. So this, for our purposes here, would be at time 0. So it's the cost for renting a boat at 0 hours, which means it is the initial cost. It's that upfront cost. So whether you're renting the boat for 3 hours, 8 hours, whatever it's going to be, there's this upfront cost, which according to the intercept at 5, which is the total cost in dollars, then what we're looking at here is that's the initial cost before we do any additional calculation of the hourly rate. So initial, answer choice A for a question like 15. And that's one that we want to conceptually be able to answer very quickly on test day, as long as we know that when you're talking about a y-intercept, you are talking about that initial or starting value. Now let's take a look at 16, which also pertains to the same graph. Which of the following represents the relationship between H and C? So if we know that C represents Y, then hopefully we can recognize that a lot of these equations are set up to look like y equals mx plus b. And we already know that that intercept should be 5, because we saw that in the previous step. So with that intercept of 5, we can say, and let me just zoom in here and show us that intercept is right in between 4 and 6. We see that intercept is at 5. So as far as our slope-intercept form is concerned, we should have something that has a plus 5 as a constant, which allows us to eliminate A and D. And now between B and C, we need to figure out the slope. Is it 3/4 or is it 3? So for slope, remember, slope is rise over run. So here, again, let's zoom back into the graph, and let's look as we go from one point to the other. So you're going to go up and over. And this is what I see students do all the time on this question. So we want to make sure we're really careful here, because test takers fall for this, and they do have both tempting answer choice, the correct one and a tempting answer choice present for us. So your rise over run. A lot of times we get used to just counting the little boxes, the little tick marks, and we go 1, 2, 3 up, and then we go 1, 2, 3, 4 over. So 3 up, 4 over. The slope is 3/4, right? But be very careful, because the scale matters. If you look along the bottom, even though it looks like you're counting over 4 tick marks here on this graph, the scale matters. You're really only going over, this entire space here is 1 unit. It's only representative of 1 hour. So you're really doing a rise of 3 in terms of the total cost, and then you're doing a run or a horizontal move of 1 unit. So it's 3 over 1 rather than 3 over 4. And on a question like this, it's not uncommon that you'll have both options, 3/4 or 3. And remember, it is 3 over 1, answer choice C, because you have to include the scale. You have to look at how many units you go, not just how many tick marks you go in your graph. Up next, let's take a look at question 17. So for this one, here we have another graph to figure out, and it says the complete graph of the function f is shown in the xy plane above. For what value of x is the value of f of x at its minimum? So they're asking about a minimum. Let's see where we see a minimum in the graph. So a lot of times people will look here and say, yeah, that's the minimum. Now the key is, are they asking for the value of the minimum, or are they asking for the x value at the minimum? And in this case, they're asking for the value of x. So if we look at that corresponding x value, here that's a -1, -2, -3, that's where our x value is for that minimum point. So the x value is at -3. A lot of people accidentally select -2 as their answer choice here because they're looking at the y value. The y value would be at -2. That's the value of the minimum, but the question is asking for the x value at the minimum, which would be -3 for number 17. Up next, in our next video, we're going to take a look at our next few multiple choice questions in